Why cryptocurrency is here to stay? Welcome to Metaversity, your first stop for everything on the new frontier of metaverse and everything blockchain. I'm Chris with Kristen, and we'll explore and learn this new world together. So I thought we'd start out. We actually just talked about this in a last couple episodes back about, where crypto's going. It's the crypto winter, but is this the financial people that are kind of against crypto are saying, this is the end of crypto as we know it, and all of that stuff. But it seems to be getting seemingly worse right now. So the stock market is continuing to go down. It's officially a bear market. And we're not really getting into whether you should invest or not invest and who you should invest in, but more of, is this the end of crypto, or is crypto going to be here to stay? And I think you and I believe that this is a result of crypto still being treated like a investment,
Right.
a volatile investment, some might say, but still an investment versus a currency.
Well, I mean, we've already kind of touched on this a few times, but yeah, as long as it's being treated like this with no other, purpose yet, like that's kind of where we're, like that's just what we're seeing, So when you treat it like an investment instead of the currency that it is, because it's hard to use it as a currency right now, other than sending money from me to you and a few other rare exceptions. I can't go to Walmart yet and, use that currency to actually buy goods.
Yep.
And I think once I see that change, then all of a sudden, now things should stabilize more, and, you should see it kind of be treated more the right way instead of how we see it now.
I want to pop open a graph just to kind of give you an idea of what people are saying. So on this graph, doesn't even really matter which line, whether it's the top line or the bottom line is cryptocurrency versus like normal stock market stuff. Kind of in the past, cryptocurrency and the stock market, if you overlaid, the ups and downs, they kind of went together. And that goes kind of in line. I'm going to go ahead and bring that back down so we can see each other again. Kind of goes in line with that whole, they've kind of been coupled together. But here in the last few days, Coinbase has announced that they're going to have to let go like 18% of their staff members.
Right. It's like 1,000 employees or something, right?
Yeah, it's a lot for a company their size. And now the financial people are saying, oh, they've decoupled, and it's continuing to go down faster than the stock market. Now, I think you and I agree that this is all about transactions.
Right.
So right now, it takes a long time to move cryptocurrency around. To purchase things is expensive. The fees for using cryptocurrency it can be expensive. The gas for that changes depending on the cryptocurrency and things like that. But as the technology changes, Ethereum is getting closer to the merge. Moving from proof of work to proof of stake, the transaction speeds and fees for those transactions should start to plummet. And then doing exactly what you said, running to Walmart to pay for some groceries should be something that's very doable with cryptocurrency instead of fiat money or your credit card or whatever.
Right.
And so I think with that's when you're going to see the true decoupling of things like the cryptocurrency and the stock market. Because if you look at a lot of traditional investments together, whether it's the stock market or it's agriculture or something like that, those are all heavily influenced by what's happening in the world. And I think that's what you're seeing now. And then what people are starting to say is the decoupling really isn't a decoupling. It's the same thing people would do if a giant scandal hit Disney tomorrow, or Tesla, 100 cars that Tesla made had the wheels fly off. despite whatever the stock market's doing, those stocks would go down. And, with cryptocurrency, I think you're seeing Coinbase, one of the larger exchanges, having to let some people go. The investors are looking at that and they're like, oh, here's something else. So it's not really a decoupling. I think people are just reacting naturally to circumstances inside, the world of cryptocurrency.
Well, sure. And I mean, if Coinbase is seeing, there's a few reasons they could be choosing to downsize like this.
Mm-hmm.
Like the most obvious one is they're not making the money that they had, and now they can't actually support that many employees, like financially support them as a business. The other thing could be, and I don't know this, but I'm just saying, like off the top of my head, if they have made decisions as this kind of centralized wallet experience for users, and then users decided that they didn't want to do that anymore. Like maybe they just decided they didn't want that kind of wallet, and they want to do cold wallets instead of hot wallets, for example. And they had half their user base or more just pull out. They were in the news not that long ago for making some decisions about who had access to what of their own money. Yeah. And, if a user decided, and a large enough group of users, I should say, decided to pull out because of those decisions, then that would hurt them as a business. And then therefore they couldn't support having that many employees, and they would have to let them go. So, I don't know, without more details and more information and more transparency into their business, which we're probably not likely to get, it's hard to really say what spurred that. And so to make these knee-jerk statements or have that knee-jerk reaction to, well, now it's decoupling or whatever it is, I feel like that's just the naysayers just trying to chime in about, the fact that they don't like crypto and see, this is just another example of blah. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that.
No, and a lot of these are your traditional financial folks who don't fully understand it yet. They don't understand what it's actually backed by, and so when they see this, they just think that this was the inevitable, and there's no inevitable. I think it may still go down more before it comes back up, but you may see the death of some meme coins because of all of this. But I think at the end of the day, the technology itself that this is built on is here to stay. And I think your major cryptocurrencies for sure are going to be around for a long time. And the technology is going to make this way more feasible for people to use. And, we can get into things like the very things that are influencing it a little bit now are actually helping out people. Ukraine's using cryptocurrency to raise money, and some of these developing nations are still, everything that's happening has still not been enough to scare people away in some of those circumstances from using it. It's still something safer than their existing fiat currency.
It's all about the utility of it.
Exactly.
And as you see these hurdles become, overcome, you start to see the technology really, like you're saying, improve and become more useful for people, long term. And it'll help kind of steer this ship towards that for all the coins, enabling actual utility, not just for, the big cryptocurrencies, but, even smaller coins as well.
Sure. And then I think the last thing on this is, I think it's hopefully not something where people here will become complacent about this technology, because this is where, a smaller, maybe one of those developing nations where people are starting to really kind of grab hold of the concept of using this because it's safer than their existing currency. We've seen huge, rock stars in development for various technologies come out of developing nations. And sometimes people seem surprised, but I think there's a lot more access to technology now. And, as these countries start to to grab hold and embrace this technology, you might start seeing some of these technologies we're talking about where it will drive those fees and those transaction times way down, come out of those places. It would be really cool if it was here in the US, but we get.
Well, I mean, these are generally speaking very global coins, so it should.
Yeah,
I think.
And in some ways, it's probably a great thing if it does, But it would also be cool if we had that same ingenuity come out of the U.S.
Yeah.
So, kind of on a completely different topic, I saw that Nreal is kind of back in the news. So their Nreal Lite and Nreal Air models are going to start beta testing the ability to play Steam games on. They still call them AR glasses. I don't know if I go that far.
I mean, it sounds more like they'd be just heads-up display, for the games.
Yeah, and they have the ability to mimic, they have the ability to do like a heads-up display, but they also have the ability to essentially be the same as like a over 100-inch screen. And so I could definitely see playing games on these being a lot of fun. They're looking to add the Steam support. They currently support Xbox Cloud, but Xbox Cloud kind of limits the number of people who can utilize these for games and things like that. So they're wanting to start supporting Steam, and not all the games are quite supported yet, but they are beta testing it now, and they're going to start optimizing some of the games for play on devices like this, which is great for Steam and for Nreal to be working together on. Because even though these probably aren't true AR glasses, I think it paves the way for similar glasses and actual AR glasses in the future to have support for things that are going to draw people in. The thing that's always scary about these technologies is the use of them when they first come out. If there's nothing to do on them, people won't use them, and they kind of die even though the potential's there.
Right.
So I'm kind of excited to see what Nreal's gonna to do with it. Now, before we started, we were talking about some stuff. It's basically a big private screen for you to play your games on. You still have to have a controller. You're not using hand gestures and things like that to play the games. It's just going to be another method for you to be able to play them, and maybe not tie up your TV while doing it, or make it portable. Maybe play your Steam games on an airplane or a bus ride. There's going to be a lot of, I think, utility for them.
Sure. I think probably the first hurdles that you see that they're going to have to overcome with even this kind of use is battery life.
Yes.
I assume this is going to be playing Steam games that are sort of they've got to be kind of coming from a computer of some type. You're obviously, it feels obvious to me, I guess, that you're not going to be
right
playing them directly from your headset. Your headset's got to be tethered to some computing device somewhere. Now, that could be your phone, or it could be a laptop. I don't know. But I'm just kind of curious to see how that goes, and then the actual battery life.
Right, exactly. So we'll be, looking to see how that device goes. I had an image to pull up, but looks like I had a little technical difficulty, so we'll skip that for now.
Okay.
So kind of exciting. I would, because they're going to be something that's available, would love to get my hands on them and play with them.
For sure. Anytime you see these, I noticed when we were walking through Best Buy recently that the Facebook Ray-Ban ones are out in the Best Buy stores. They don't have, at least at ours anyway, they didn't have like a working demo. They just had them there. From a fashion standpoint, they look pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Would love to actually see them, experience them and see kind of what that is like when they're actually on and on your face. But yeah, it's we need more of these out in the universe so we can all try them out. And the the more that people can see them and get used to seeing them and use them, the more it'll kind of push this technology forward, and we'll start to see things like, come from it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then kind of the last thing, so Meta as in, I think Facebook, we talk about the metaverse a lot, and I think Meta and metaverse get kind of mixed up from time to time. They
did that on purpose.
Yes. that feels very on purpose to me.
Yes, it does.
So I had a couple images to pull up for this too, but they weren't really anything directly related to the story, so I don't think they add anything to it. But they're using Hong Kong as a testing ground for their AR and VR technology. So what they're doing is they're going to some various cafe chains, schools, art institutes, and things like that, and they are using things like VR at exhibits, and local cafes to show basically people what the practical use of these devices could be. And then with AR, they're now this isn't AR like AR glasses. It's going to be like tablets and phones and that kind of stuff for now, because we're just talking about AR glasses, and the true ones don't totally exist yet. But we know Meta's working on some, and Apple and everybody else.
I mean, there are AR glasses.
There
correct are. That. There are.
There are. Yes, I'm sorry.
There's no mainstream ones yet. There's none that kind of fit the bill for where we know we're going, from a do they look cool standpoint, that kind of thing. But
you're right. I stand corrected. There are, but like you said, they're not really consumer and not readily available everywhere.
They're not what we're thinking of every time we talk about AR glasses.
Right.
Like the short of it. So Facebook is doing this thing that's very similar to it sounds like it's a similar idea to what brought them to the point where they were opening brick and mortar.
Yeah, I think
they opened it on their campus, but still.
I think there's the technology is still new, and I think a lot of people still think of all of this stuff is like a giant VR experience, like a video game, and a lot of it is. So it's easy to understand where that comes from. But knowing that, we've had stories where they're using digital twins and VR environments to help people fight fires and to work on buildings and, all this type of things. So I think they're trying really hard for people to see the technology as more than just a place to play games, where they can actually use the technology for something for the greater good and for education and that thing.
That people have the least hard time envisioning technology advancement like this for games. It's funny how that's like the easy one.
Right.
But when you're like, hey, how can it actually be used in my everyday life? Everybody goes, well, I don't know. And they blank out. They don't know. But there's so many applications like that, we've talked a lot about those, but I mean, to stretch your imagination a little bit. It could be, we love living in Florida. We love to go fishing. I could think of a dozen applications for AR and VR that would help me, like, spot artificial reefs or reefs in general, I guess. To be able to tell general depths. We know a lot of that information already, and we have a lot of ways of measuring, tides and waves and depth already. So those services exist if you pay for them right now, as a boater, for example. To take that information and kind of turn it into a digital twin with maps that we already have, which granted, I know those are not nearly as plentiful, but there are a lot of them. In the Tampa Bay area, I'm sure that's pretty well covered. So it would be very useful to have that. So if you had your AR glasses, for example, you could easily see depths right there. You don't have to keep looking down at your screen, as you're trying to boat around, and you're driving your boat.
Or guess where the structure is, it could
exactly.
You could just kind of see it.
You would see it is right there as you approach it, and it would come closer as you get closer to it, and you could be like, okay, now I know I'm over this structure.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm sure there could be a list that comes up, and it pops up and is like, hey, there's commonly grouper found here, and, bass, or not bass, there would be grouper and bass, but like,
in the lakes. I mean, I think it's still applicable. They're not in Tampa Bay, but
No. But I'm just saying, like, so I was thinking snapper and bass came out of my mouth, so whatever. That's how it is sometimes when you're tired. So, anyway, like, that's just one application. There's so many of them that I feel like are in that same vein, even, that are practical applications for this technology that people could be stretching their minds towards. You know what I mean?
Yep. No, totally. And, that's kind of what they're wanting to do. And, they even said that they're wanting to work with, people like those local creators on their NFT projects, and how they could do things like you've described, and all sorts of stuff with the technology, and try to get people to think about it more than just a gaming platform.
Right.
And really off topic, we just watched something the other day where, when you sit and think about it, a simple not very simple when you think about it, but GPS. It was originally invented by the government for our ability to track where people are and troops and all that kind of stuff. It was but now that it's been basically given to the public for access, and all the things that have come about because of that technology, it's not just about knowing where you are and directions, but it's how companies like Uber and your grocery delivery people and all that stuff like exist. There's tons of apps when you go, run around, and it tracks where you've been and how long it took you to do your run and your lap times and all that stuff. That's all because of GPS. When we start to embrace VR and AR as more than a gaming platform, there's probably a ton of applications for it that we've, just started scratching the surface on, that we haven't even thought of yet.
Exactly.
I
so
think
it's really cool to see, like, Facebook, Meta, trying to help people see those applications and, envision them. So you mentioned, though, that they're going to be, like, I don't know, testing out teaching. Is that what it was?
Yes, how to use them in like an educational scenario. I would imagine with VR, it didn't go into a ton of detail, but I imagine with VR, maybe an opportunity to have virtual classrooms, kind of like how we're doing this podcast in a virtual space.
Right.
With AR, there was some pictures, but it looked like stock art, so I don't think it was necessarily what Meta was producing. But there was pictures of, somebody holding an iPad over a book, and, the book kind of popping out of the iPad. Now, that feels very stock art-ish to me, but that's kind of the vision I think a lot of people have when they think of AR. They hold their iPad out, and, the dinosaur pops up and
right?
that kind of thing.
Because that's their portal to the digital.
Right.
Your phones, your iPads, even your PCs can be portals for that stuff.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So when the portal no longer has to be something you're holding in your hand, and it can be the thing on your face, glasses, or contacts even, all of a sudden the world just kind of opens up for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like, it's kind of with the Nreal glass we were talking about before.
Exactly.
It's a very small step in that AR direction, but it'll be game changer, I think, for education.
Well, for sure. I mean, getting people's eyes from, off of their devices and up to engaging with other people, I think also is a part of that equation.
Yep.
Now,
Hong Kong isn't by accident, though. When I first read it, I was like, why Hong Kong? I know it's a big city. There's tons of people there. And the question might be, why not Hong Kong? But, Meta's a U.S.-based company. Why not L.A. or San Francisco or New York or Miami or some other big city that's right in their backyard? Well, I think this is because their big rival that's been going on for a little while now, Animoca Brands, which I probably said it wrong, but if you don't know who they are, they're the creator of Sandbox.
Right.
They've been having kind of a fundamental battle between their beliefs and what the metaverse should be.
Okay.
And
Battle with Meta.
Right.
Okay.
So I probably said that weird. So basically the sandbox people don't agree with the direction that Meta is headed with their philosophy on the metaverse versus theirs. So Meta believes in more of a large, more centralized metaverse experience that may exist on a decentralized network. So they're still thinking very centralized. And their key argument is for things like virtual land, like they've got tons of questions about, how virtual land works and how real it is. And what they mean by that is, let's say it's not limited to Sandbox because there's lots of similar environments as Sandbox. But their argument is, what if Sandbox is gone tomorrow? Who do I ask to get my virtual land?
So that's what Facebook's saying.
That's what Facebook is saying, that there should be a centralized, safer, maybe trusted world that all your decentralized objects like your NFTs and that kind of stuff.
So that's what Meta has said repeatedly, that, that's what they want to be. They want to own the metaverse. They want to be the metaverse.
Right. And
the reality is that that's not the direction we're headed.
No. And of course, Animoca Brands believes that it should be a completely decentralized experience.
Right.
Now,
of course, that's humorous.
Now they're
centralized
at the moment, yeah, but that's where their belief is.
Right.
And you can buy virtual land that's owned as an NFT off of their centralized environment. So there is about as close to that as you can get with the existing technology and abilities right now.
Well, we've got some limitations, but you see decentralized social media platforms that exist. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for the Sandbox folks to kind of take that next step. But it does take some ingenuity, I think, to answer a lot of the questions that are kind of technically outstanding. I don't think right off the top of my head, I go, well, it's not impossible. I think it's very overcomable to do that. It's very achievable. Right. So I would love to see more than just a philosophy from them. I would love to, understand more about their vision for that path and how they actually intend to achieve actually decentralized.
Sure.
As opposed to the only somewhat, that they're currently at.
Well, Animoca basically is saying,
especially if they're in a battle with Meta,
what I mean? Right. Well, they're openly, kind of talking about their various philosophies, but Animoca takes it, a step further and uses the words that I think a lot of people who are interested in decentralized technology and Web3, which is they're wanting to make a more equitable, God, I can't talk today, access to asset ownership. So they want it to be more equal for everybody.
Right.
Which we know that in a centralized world that's sometimes difficult to make it more equitable because Facebook has control and it always starts innocently, but they'll make this rule to protect these people and they'll make this change because they think that it's a better environment for everyone. And then before you know it, accidentally, I'm going to take that approach to it anyway. Accidentally, it skews everything towards one group of people, whether it's in a virtual world or it's in the real world. That tends to happen with laws and regulations and rules and that kind of
slippery slopes even.
But, I think reading between the lines, that Animoca is actually thinking beyond what everybody is calling the metaverse now, which are kind of these virtual sandbox rules or, environments like we're in right now that Meta has made and that kind of thing. I think they're headed towards what you've always talked about, which is when we have a digital map of the world and now people own virtual pieces of that. instead of it being a completely made up world. Now we're talking about the virtual land version of the real world. And I think that, in a world where Meta owns that's terrible. But in a world where it's decentralized and, everybody has an opportunity to have a piece of that, to own their piece of the world.
Well, kind of the interesting thing is, better. I don't think I've seen steps from Meta's side to actually do that. But we have seen steps from companies like Snap and Niantic that they're absolutely headed that path.
Right.
That's their vision. That's what they're trying to, contribute to this Web3 future.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that when you hear people like Animoca talk, you can tell that that's where they're thinking 10 steps ahead. They're not necessarily talking about that.
Well, I think what's exciting
but that's what they're thinking.
I think what's exciting about that is that they're at least seeming to me like they're in this path where it should be decentralized. People should own their stuff, that kind of path versus I want to own it.
Right.
And, from a company standpoint, that's a hard switch for a business to make, because what are they going to do? What is their money making thing? Like, how are they a business that stays in business?
Right.
And you have to see that, in the end, you can't own it. You need to find ways that you're making money as a participant in that thing and not an owner of that thing.
Right. You got to make it where you're involving all the people instead of it being a company that decides.
Yeah. And, maybe pivot away from data owning and brokerage and that kind of thing, Like, that's what Facebook has done to make all of their money in the end. Everybody says, well, Facebook makes their money off marketing. They make their money off of the data that they have gathered from free users, and how they have monopolized that data.
Exactly.
Right.
And they continue to, mine that. And if Meta, they see the metaverse as potentially being another avenue to gain more users and to gain more access to it.
More data that they can then turn around and use to grow their wealth. But it's a path that's worked. Yeah. And people were more than willing to give it to them, I guess, in the end. Or just, didn't understand what they were trading. But in the end, you never really, you envision this future where you don't have to do that. You get to own your own stuff. And, these companies don't make their money off of you.
Right.
They make it a different way by, I think, participating instead of owning.
Right. Well, and, that's why when you saw Apple and then Android decide to really kind of crank down on the privacy stuff and limit Facebook's ability to see all of that, why,
like
Meta's
tracking and stuff.
Yeah, Meta's revenue sources started drying up a lot. So, it's very obvious what their goal in mind is.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to hearing more about, kind of that path and what's happening there. It would be interesting to see if, Facebook can potentially see the light. It's not like they've not been unwilling to change their opinions. They have already done that in the time that we've done this podcast.
Yep. They originally were exactly what you said. They wanted to own it. Now they're talking about being more like metaverse experiences. Which is kind of what they are.
They're still very centralized, in their beliefs, and they're still, I want to own. It's just because they're not understanding, I think anyway, they're not understanding how else they can be a business and exist in this new kind of world. And the reality is, if they can't come to that realization, they won't be.
Right. Exactly. So,
on that note,
subscribe. Hit the like button.
Leave us a review. Catch you on the next one.